tell you what, I would be in deep trouble if I didn't allow our district director to have a few words. And I know there is something going on that's coming in the next few days. So probably she has some particular announcement you'd like. Would you really want to do it now, or would you like to do it later?
You're ready, Tom?
All right.
Okay, I'm here.
I'll let you go now because we're looking for Greg. And as you said, Greg is here. Well, let's go ahead and get our announcement in so that I don't get in too much trouble. Okay.
Okay. You won't be in trouble. Absolutely. Well, this is our Saturday, May 7th, your district conference, your annual spring conference, elections, keynote speakers, business for the district, all those wonderful things, remembrances, educationals, all that. So you'll want to be there, and you can register in District 12 News. Please check that out. We also have 3 clubs that we're getting ready to charter real soon. One is a Parliamentarian Club. So if you've ever thought about Robert's rules and how you need to be more clear, that would be a club for you. Also an entrepreneur club. So many of us are starting our own businesses, are branching out with our Zoom transferable skills and doing wonderful things in the world. And the PET team, the program and quality director part of the Pathways program that we had last year, has kind of morphed itself into an up and coming club. So those of you that enjoy Pathways and would like to share it at your club meetings and help the district get that out and get more members involved, that would be a club for you. So lots of fun and excitement in District 12. Thank you, Tom, for the privilege.
Okay, thank you for that. And let me welcome everybody to the official Mother's Day themed tribute to mothers. And when I thought of this idea a few months ago, I'll bounce it off. I'm not sure how that'll work out. I am so happy with how it's worked out. My vision for it, let's hope we get at least a little bit of that vision fulfilled. My vision is that people walk out of the room with tears on their smiling faces. So you guys that are speaking, you have an assignment to fulfill. Have to make sure you bring some tears and some smiles to the audience. And we all, whose mothers are gone, hoping our mothers are there looking on the outside, looking down to see us all. And with that, I'm going to, when we do this, it's going to be fast and furious because I've no introductions, no special considerations, no matter how super you are. You're going to get your name and you're going to get your title, and that's going to be it. So, and these will, of course, will be recorded. I want to first, I will thank all my sidekicks here. I thank Marilyn, who will be our timer. Marilyn, are you there somewhere to be able to show us your timing lights? They're all to be only 5 to 7 minutes. And I have asked her to flash us. She's going to be a flasher tonight if we go over. I just practiced mine, and you might just be flashing me at the end of the meeting. So there's a chance that'll happen. But anyway, there's Marilyn, our timer. Thank you so much for your help. Of course, none of this would be possible without Rob Gunnerman. So wave at us, Rob, so we know who is I'm so dependent upon there. And Rob Gunnerman, and our final helper who's not here tonight, Sharon Kenty, who puts out those beautiful flyers that are sent out. So that was an impressive group, and hopefully a few people will come because of that. But we are recorded thanks to Rob Gunnerman. And so if you know someone, you saw somebody you really were impressed with, you want others to see, they will be available on YouTube, and those numbers will be out later. And of course, the final announcement is next month we'll be doing fathers. So we have to give those fathers equal time. And we have a number of people signed up, and there are still some opportunities for people to do that, 5 to 7 minutes. All right, grab a hold of your seat. This is a roller coaster of speeches that should be great because at least half of our speakers are qualified speakers. I have heard a number of them, a number of the speeches, and I know I have great faith in all of our speakers that will be speaking today. And number one, followed by number two. Number one will be Greg Scott. I would walk 1,000,000 miles for one of your smiles. I would walk 1,000,000 miles for one of your smiles, Greg Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters. The sun shines east, the sun shines west. I know where the sun shines best with my mammy. 1921, May 21st, 100 years ago, Mildred Lois Scott was born in Flagstaff, Arizona, to Douglas and Abigail Decker. With their family, they moved throughout since he was a minister on the road. After graduating in 1939, she married Donald Scott, lived in Willow Glen, and became the secretary for the dean of the Willow Glen High School. Because she was medically incapable of giving birth, they decided to adopt a son. And after searching, they found one that had been in Sacramento and moved to San Francisco in an orphanage. And there were my parents. I was so lucky to have such great parents. She taught me as soon as I could get old enough to walk how to play baseball, to go fishing and hunting. And by 10, she had me riding horses. Of course, she was a tomboy and a wild one outside. She enjoyed the outside, and I went along for the ride. In 1961, she ended her marriage, and my parents both remarried. And remember in 1956 in high school, fourth grade, I did not pass because I wasn't reading. And every night for the next year, when I returned to that same grade, she spent the evening with me reading and helping me tutoring to read See Dick Run, See Jane Say Hi, and See Spot Run. What a mom. She was there solid for me all the time. She was always proud of me, and she told me, he says, because you're the black sheep of our family and you're adopted, never mind what the rest of the folks say or how they might react. He says, I always be proud of you because you make me proud of what you do. Upon her retirement, her and her husband moved to Ennis, Montana, for a life of fishing, hunting, horse riding, and lapidary work, where she caught a lot of big fish. She did a lot of art herself, and her lapidary shop made a lot of jewelry. What a mom to go by. Upon her death, going through her things, I found a card among them. It says, Greg Scott, fire captain. This is years ago. And it's written in her handwriting, my son, my son. Following that funeral in the San Bernardino Monterey unit where I was assigned, I was so honored to be taken by the help of so many firefighters from both the San Bernardino Monterey and the Santa Clara. And the unit chief made an announcement over the radio that flags would be flown at half staff in memory of Mildred Bishop in honor of Captain Scott's mother. I was never so taken and never so proud of my mom. For all the things she did, she was proud of me and kept encouraging me to go further and further. And I think that's a big reason why I enjoyed in the promotions and making friends. And I wish I had been a Toastmaster back then so I could have better expressed myself. So when you think about your mother, Mammy, my Mammy, I'd walk 1,000,000 miles for one of your smiles, Mammy. Thank you, Al Joseph, for that song, Mr. Toastmaster.
All right, wonderful, a good beginning. And now, step 2, Horace Alexander. My mom, my sweetest friend. My mom, my sweetest friend, Horace Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. We do not get to choose what families we are born into or what parents we're born to. But in the great lottery of life, I was a lucky winner. My parents were Garnet and Joyce Alexander. And tonight I'm here to pay tribute to my mother, Joyce Alexandra Alexander, a beautiful lady. Now, my father argued that since her maiden name was Alexandra and his last name was Alexander, that it was therefore predestined that they should marry. And so here I am, their firstborn. And my mother not only gave me life, but she showed me how to live. First, her youthful years were an inspiration to me in my youthful years. At the age of 18, she was enough of a leader to be elected the elder of her local church. And after that, she defied her immediate family and the church family and traveled across the island of Jamaica from her rural town to college for a college education. Now, without any support at all from her family or from her church folks, she worked her way through college to pay for her room and board and tuition. And to do this, she did a number of menial jobs. Now, at that time in Jamaica, the class distinctions were very pronounced. And for her to do menial jobs like that was frowned upon. However, it was at West Indies College where she met and married my father, and it was where she was trained as a teacher. And from her youthful years, I learned the dignity of labor. And I learned the relentless pursuit of worthwhile goals. Her upbeat personality and her positive outlook earned her the nickname among her college classmates of Sunshine. And so years later, when I met any of her friends, if they called her Sunshine, I knew immediately that these were classmates from way back. She was also a very good speaker, and she was my dad's speech coach. Now, he was a local politician, and I can guarantee you he would not have been as successful as he was had she not been his speech coach. Now, my first experience in facing an audience came when my mom and I sang a Now, I was just a wee lad, and I was standing there beside her on the platform, and I was shaking like a leaf. She put her arm around my waist and pulled me closer to her, and I put my arm around her waist, and arm in arm, we sang that duet together. And from that first beginning, I've faced many an audience. Now, she could also coach on interpersonal relationships, and I appreciated that very much because during my teenage years, as a young man anxious to know whether or not I had any influence with the opposite sex, she would counsel to me and say that the overtures that I made to my female friends could be taken very seriously by them and that I could break someone's heart. And therefore, that's a consideration that I should take seriously. On another occasion, she gave me a great big hug, and Mom's hugs were just heartwarming. To me, that was a noble thing for you to do. Now, to this day, I cannot recall what that noble thing was that I did, but the fact that she held me in such high regard had me live up to that image of myself that she had of me, and went a long ways to making me the man that I am today. One of my recent compliments that I received from my wife, which I treasure, is that she says she sees a lot of my mom in me. Now, my mom was also an educator par excellence. She and my father founded a private school to give access to students who were not successful in the government program. And she had a way of having students discover the joy of learning and the thrill of discovery. She saw extraordinary possibilities in ordinary people. Have told me over the years that she has helped them to fill out application forms for college, and she has even paid their application fees to get them into college because she saw possibilities in them that they never saw in themselves. Now, one significant thing that impacted my life was that she had absolute confidence in me. Now, my father, when he drove a little too fast, she would caution him, slow down. But whenever I was driving, she never, ever did that. And yet I drove, looking back on it, real crazy in those days, but she never said a word. Now, one day I was taking her home from work, and the rain had fallen that day, and there were puddles over the road here and there. And so I just drove through the puddles and watched the spray along the side of the cars and enjoying myself. And then, oh, by the way, that car was an old Ford with a manual transmission, 4 on the floor, and the housing around the base of the gear lever had worn away, and so there's a big hole there. You could look down through that hole and see the road. And here I am, and I'm driving along, and I see a larger than average puddle. So I revved up that car and I charged into it. And my goodness, a geyser of water came up into the car, shot up to the ceiling, and soaked my poor mom from head to toe. And I looked over at her, totally horrified at what I'd done to my poor mom. And she was laughing her head off. That was the kind of person that she was, that she always saw the humor in any situation. And of all men, I am doubly blessed because of my mom, my sweetest friend, Mr. Toastmaster.
Can't hear you, Tom.
Speaking on mute.
Muted. Somebody muted me. Anyway, Checo Kagi, followed by Ed Henninghausen, and Checo's title is My Mom.
Good evening, Mr. Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters. Let me explain how the marriage worked in early 50s in Japan. The marriage was usually between 2 families, but not just between a husband and wife. My father was a 5th child of 9 siblings at the farm near Tokyo. When he married my mom after the war, he changed his last name to my mom's family name, as mom was the eldest among 3 sisters. This way, mom's family line would continue. My dad's family line continued when the firstborn son took over the family name. I recall there were usually adults in the house. The family had my grandparents, my parents, my mom's 2 sisters, and 3 of the kids. We had 9 people in the house. I can imagine that mom started a tough marriage because mom and dad could not keep the house all to themselves, but have to share it with the rest of the family. Although my grandma and her other 2 daughters helped mom with the housework, mom cooked and cleaned all the time. Mom cooked dinner more than once a day for her dad, for her sisters, for her husband, and for the rest of the family. Mom did not have a microwave oven in the 50s and 60s. Her dad, my grandpa, worked as a school security guard and had dinner at 4. After grandpa, mom's sisters needed to have dinner at around 5 to make to their night school. Then kids, grandma and mom ate at 6 because kids couldn't wait for dad's return. And then my dad came home. He came home usually at around 8 o'clock because he commuted a long distance. She could have made dinner only once and people would have warmed it up. But mom got the dinner ready each time someone sat at the table. And she did the cooking every day. I thought the family often took advantage of her, as she did not complain at all. In addition to all this cooking and cleaning, her first son was extremely ill. My brother, Shu, caught the last wave of polio in Japan and was bedridden all his life. Mom often took my brother to doctors with me. Despite all the care and love, my brother died at age 5 when I was 6. I recall I did not help my mom at all. What I could do was to play with my brother while mom was cooking, cleaning. She never raised her voice or never complained. That's what something that I cannot do. Mom was consistently calm, handling all the pressure and the family quite well. Despite the busy housework and care for her sick son, she managed to find time to knit sweaters for me, for other members of the family, and for herself. Tonight, I am wearing the sweater that my mom made to tribute to my mom. She liked knitting and won the first prize for designing and making a sweater for my dad. Mom, you are quite a woman. You are an unsung hero for my family. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you so much, Checo. What a wonderful story. And to actually wear something that your mother made. That is really special. Our next speaker is Ed Ettinghausen, followed by Marjorie Banesh. Ed Ettinghausen, 3 lessons from my mama bear. 3 lessons from my mama bear. Ed Ettinghausen.
Thank you, Tom. As I was listening to Greg and Horace talk about their mother, I felt a connection with Greg because I am adopted and actually was born in Sacramento. So as you talked about that area, it brought back some memories. And I thought about Horace saying, you're not able to choose your parents. Well, actually, I chose my adopted family. And let me explain how that happened. My mother was kind of a sickly child. And when she was in the 8th grade, she dropped out of school. She was married off to who would become my father when she was 18 and he was 36. He actually had a daughter that was only 4 years older than my mother. So she got pregnant right away and had 4 kids of her own that she raised. And then when my father retired, they decided to take in foster children. And I happened to be the second child that they took in. And it's actually the only family that I know, or only parents I know, because I had been in multiple foster homes from the age of 7 months on. I don't have memories from those, which is probably just as well, since the records show that I had been physically abused in some of those homes. So it's good that I don't have those memories. But my mother and my foster father were attempting to adopt me, and my biological parents wouldn't give permission. My biological mother was schizophrenic bipolar, and she had this idea that at some point she was going to make a home that I could come back to. And that just wasn't possible with her mental illness. So eventually at the age of 12, the courts were set up in a way to where a 12-year-old could actually make the decision over their biological parents. And so I had the opportunity to decide. I went before a judge, and in judge's chambers, he asked me if this was what I wanted. And of course it was. And they were kind of in a hurry to get that done because my father had colon cancer and was not doing well. It was going downhill pretty quick. So they rushed the paperwork through, and I was adopted at the age of 12, and my name went from Edwin Marion Richardson Jr. to Edwin William Ettinghausen. William being my adopted father's middle name. Got rid of that Marion, which I couldn't stand growing up. I would have gotten rid of Edwin as well, except that my mother convinced me that it was a good name to have. And lest I forget that the second man on the moon was Buzz Aldrin, which his name actually is Edwin, or was Edwin. So she reminded me of that. And after my father died, my mother did become sort of a mother bear. She was, the polite way would be to say a burly woman. She was a bit on the large side, so kind of bear-like characteristics, but also very, very protective of me. And I learned some lessons from my mother, many lessons, but 3 of which I'd like to share with you tonight. The first lesson that I can remember from my mother was simply this: mind your manners. I learned from an early age that it wasn't polite to interrupt anyone, especially adults. It also wasn't polite to address an adult by their first name. I learned the manners of addressing them by Mr. or Mrs., but also I learned how to say madam or sir and ma'am, and also yes, please, sorry. All those great words that you learn when you're learning good manners. And I learned also how important it was to have a firm handshake. It's something you would think maybe my father would have taught me, but it was my mother who taught me that. So the first thing that I remember is manners. They were so important, and my mother made sure that I learned those early on. And there was what would now be considered non-traditional punishment that was meted out if I didn't quite mind my manners. It could be something as simple as standing in the corner. And if you remember that as a punishment as a child, standing facing the wall, 6 inches away from the wall in a corner, kind of absurd punishment, but nonetheless, that was our form of timeout back in the 60s. I also sometimes went to bed without dinner. And on some occasions, my mother believed firmly in spare the rod, spoil the child. So I had a few whippings in my time. Those forms of punishment now would maybe be considered abusive, but back in the day, they were par for the course. So manners was the first thing that my mother taught me. The second thing that she taught me, and I don't think she taught this to me by design, but it was mind over matter. My mother had this odd, peculiar way of getting strep throat every February. And as January would roll around, she would talk about it and remind everyone that she was going to get strep throat in February. And sure enough, every single year in February, my mother got strep throat. Mind over matter. Another mind over matter that I learned from my mother is she had a severe fear of snakes. I remember one time we were driving to church and there was a snake in the road, and my mom said, "George, kill it." And of course, my father swerved the car and ran over the snake. And she said, "George, kill it again." And he backed up and ran over the snake again. As we pulled away on our way to church, I looked behind me, and that poor, lifeless stick was still in the road. And I remember there was a young lady that I had an interest in who had caught a king snake. Wild king snake was quite tame, and I really wanted to impress her, but I had that fear of snakes from my mother. But somehow mind over matter had something that was more important to me than that fear. And I actually held that snake and realized for the very first time, you know what? Snakes aren't so bad after all. The third thing that my mother taught me, and my mother died when I was 18. I was off in college. What I find to be interesting is that she had a severe heart attack and needed CPR, and none of my family knew CPR. At the time, I was taking a CPR instructor course and became actually a full-time CPR instructor. I've done that now for over 30 years. But a lesson I learned from my mom is mind your memories. My mother wasn't a saint by any stretch of the imagination, but she did the best with what she had. And even though it's now been almost 42 years since my mother passed away, we have the opportunity to choose what memories we recall and what memories we foster in our mind and what memories we adopt. And so I've chosen to focus on all the good memories. And I had quite a few with my mother. So I would challenge you as you think back on your mother, if she's no longer with you, to think about the memories that serve you well. For me, again, minding my manners, mind over matter, and mind your memories. And I would just challenge you to keep that in mind. And any of the characteristics of your mother that maybe weren't so admirable, how about just let those go? Because as my friend Randy likes to say, it's all in your head. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Ed. Even leave us with lessons to learn from your mother. So that's wonderful. Our next speaker will be Marjorie Banesh, followed by Roz Carter. Marjorie Banesh, my hero, my mom. My hero, my mom.
At 8 years old, I was gifted with horseback riding lessons. It was the closest I got to my birthday and Christmas wishes to own a horse of my own. After my first lesson, I remember telling Mom, "Oh yes, I want a horse of my own." Her reply, "Margie, keep that dream alive. You act on it. Whatever you strive for, whatever you want to do or become can happen." She always encouraged me to go after my dreams and goals as she did. Back to May 1927. Charles Lindbergh was in the news, on the radio and newspapers. His 33-and-a-half-hour solo flight, nonstop, across the Atlantic from New York to Paris made aviation history. News of Charles Lindbergh and the spirit of St. Louis ignited the imagination of 8-year-old Lavelle Richards. She knew then and there that she wanted to become a pilot. When she told her parents she wanted to become a pilot, they forbade her to even speak about flying around the house or with them. She didn't speak about it, but she started reading everything she could about planes and flying. She even made up a secret scrapbook from one of her comic books. She hid it among her regular books. January 1st, 1937. 10 years later, Lavelle and her high school sweetheart had their first flying lesson at Los Angeles. It was at Lavelle's request in lieu of a New Year's Eve dinner and date. They both started working after school and on weekends and earned their pilot's license, a dream come true for Lavelle. Parents' permission wasn't required back then. Lavelle didn't even tell her parents she was flying until after she got her license. Her mom cried. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, recreation flying was curtailed here on the West Coast. Lavelle moved from Los Angeles to Phoenix, Arizona, to continue her flying and working. On a Friday afternoon, September 1942, Lavelle walked away from her job. Lunchtime, reading the newspaper, she read an article about aviatrix Jacqueline Cochran. She was developing a program for women for the Army Air Force in non-combat. She was starting a flight training program. Lavelle took the newspaper to her boss and said, "I quit. I'm going to be one of Jacqueline's pilots." Her boss's answer, "You're crazy." No, Lavelle wasn't crazy. She did quit then and there. The newspaper didn't have any sign-up information, so Lavelle did the next best thing. She wrote to President Roosevelt to sign up for Miss Cochran's program. Lavelle had an interview with Miss Cochran in Phoenix, Arizona, and was told that the first group of women had already been selected, but she was planning more groups. That didn't deter Lavelle. No, she had some male pilots who were friends of Miss Cochran's. Soon after, Lavelle was contacted to have a second interview with Miss Cochran in Indio, California. Shortly after that, Lavelle did receive a telegram to report to Luke Field in Arizona for her physical, then report to Houston, Texas. Lavelle was going to have another dream come true. She was one of the 319th Army Air Force Women's Flying Training Detachment that came to be called the Guinea Pigs, the first in the program organized by Miss Cochran. Later, that program was joined with Nancy Love's program, and they became Women Air Force Service Pilots, WASP. Her flight instructor in Houston changed her from plane to plane, made her go into forced landing and forced landing, hoping to wash her out. No, she graduated with flying colors. She was stationed in Long Beach, California. For her, Long Beach had a party atmosphere. Though flying was serious, she enjoyed the fun. One night, some of the WASP stationaire were having a drink in the officers' lounge. Some men pilots came in. One of them winked at Lavelle. Lavelle winked back, then asked her friend, "Mary, who was that who winked at me?" "Why, Lavelle, that's Ken Banesh." Lavelle's response, "Oh, drat. If he asks me for a date, I will have to date him." And that's a story for another time. They were married. And after the WASPs were disbanded in 1944, Lavelle became a full-time homemaker and mother, but she kept up her flying as co-pilot with her husband, my dad. They flew across the US, Europe, Africa, Asia, Indonesia. They flew through storms, instrument failures, engine failures, hostile fire, and forced landings. Through all of that trial and tribulations, Lavelle was always smiling, was always thankful, and saw a silver lining. She told me to pursue my goals and keep smiling. And I did get my horse and had him for several years. Thank you, Mom. I'll keep smiling and pursuing my dream. Thank you, Mom, my hero.
Wow. Wow, Marjorie, I knew a little bit of that story, but I never knew the rest. What an inspiring and inspirational and a history lesson besides. That should be given to a few graduating classes in high school to have them know that they can fight for a dream that they have, no matter how difficult it is. Our next speaker is Roz Carter, followed by Rochelle Harrison. Roz Carter, mothers and grandmothers. Mothers and grandmothers, Roz Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. No one in this room can deny that they were not born without a mother. Sure, the dad had something to do with it, but the mother carried us in her womb. We could feel and hear her heartbeat. And the first skin that we touched after birth. There's a bond, a connection with a mother that is like nothing else in the world. My mother was born in 1933, and she was the youngest of 8 children. My grandmother was funny. She told great stories, and her mother kept her aware of the thoughts of her father because my mom was only 4 months old when her father passed away. During many years of growing up, my grandmother lived with us. She cooked, cleaned, and was there when we came home from school. Now, how many children did my mom and dad have? It was 5 of us, and I was the second born. 3 girls and 2 boys. The story about my youngest brother is when my parents bought a new home in New Orleans, and my mother told my dad, I need another baby. I have a new house. I want a new baby. He said, okay, if that's what you want. And so it became 5 of us. But being born in New Orleans, Louisiana, there were a lot of things that were going on at the time. Many of you recall in the 60s, the civil rights movement. And while I am fair complexion, I am considered Black. My parents, their parents, and all of our ancestry that came from England had been merged with the mulattoes in Louisiana. So we get our fair complexion from them, but all of my relatives, and there's a lot of them, we are all shades and all colors. The thing about being from a large family is that when it comes time to family reunions, I remember one year there was about 800 of us because everyone, my mom's sisters and brothers, as well as my dad, had lots of children. And they had lots of children. So family is the core of my life. When we would have dinner at my parents' house, we would sit around the table for hours until my mother said, okay, you guys all have a home to go to. It's time to go. It's 2:00 in the morning. Because storytelling was part of our life. The spiritual background that we have, born and raised Catholic, speaks for itself. Now, my mom had jobs that were seasonal, like being a seamstress or maybe working at a grocery store. But for the most part, she was a stay-at-home mom to raise 5 children and take care of her husband. When I was 17, I had a baby, and my mother strongly encouraged me to give her up for adoption. And while I probably could have made a different decision, I really didn't take that opportunity. My mom was very disappointed. But 36 years later, my baby found me. And we've been in each other's life since 2006. The best thing that ever happened to me. I have 3 grown children. My oldest daughter's 51, my other daughter's 45, and my youngest son is 41. Now, I have an extended family thanks to my husband, they all live in New Jersey. So I have 2 additional children, 4 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. My gray hairs might speak to my age, but I certainly don't feel like I'm an old woman. I'm getting there. Being born in New Orleans and coming up through the South, activities, if you will call it that, it nurtured something in me that said faith and love is the mainstream of our lifelong bloodstream. thanks to my mother. And as a grandmother now, I find I'm just like her. The life we live is based on them. We look at our grandchildren and we think of our children as a mirror of them, just as I'm sure my mother and grandmother looked at us as a mirror of them. Imagine back to the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and now there is that distinct flavor of Creole, Louisiana, great food, dancing, fun, storytelling, and a wonderful life that is only surpassed by our faith in God. Keep the faith, extend the love, and remember that our grandmothers and mothers and what we are today is an extension of them. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Roz. I appreciate and thank you so much for doing this speech, a very special speech to stand out amongst the ones tonight. Our next speaker is Rochelle Harrison, followed by Ryan Oddman. Rochelle, to walk this walk, you have to have that talk. To walk this walk, you have to have that talk. Rochelle Harrison.
To truly understand someone, you have to walk in their shoes. Fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, I am allowing you the opportunity to walk in mine. Don't worry, I won't ask you to put on my fancy 5-inch stilettos, although it would be quite interesting to see a few of you fellas try. Rather, I want you to take a walk in a pair of shoes that I've worn for 30 years. They are nondescript, worn, tired, and threadbare. But despite all that and everything that I'm about to tell you are my favorite. I'm inviting you to walk in my shoes and get a glimpse of what it's like to be a mother of Black sons in this country. To walk this walk, you have to have that talk. Imagine the excitement of knowing that you'll be bringing a child into the world and then being terrified for that child once you realize that it's male. Raising a Black boy is a scary blessing. It's like a big countdown from when your child grows from this adorable little person into what some people will see as a threat. You have this beautiful baby and they have so much promise, and you want them to achieve every dream and hope that they have. It's a weird feeling, all of this joy. And then knowing that it doesn't matter how great your son is. It doesn't matter how brilliant your son is. It doesn't matter how handsome your son's going to be. Some people are going to have a negative reaction just looking at him, just seeing him. And that is absolutely heartbreaking. To walk this walk, you have to have that talk. There are stages of the talk as they start to get older. It's not just one and done because the threat grows as they do. Both of my sons are well over 6 feet tall, very dark skinned, very broad shouldered. I'm not sure when they got to be so big, especially my baby. To some, he's always going to look older than 17 years old. To some, this heart of gold, goofy as can be kid will look menacing. He will look threatening. To have to tell him that the truth is, it doesn't matter how good a person he is, how smart, how caring, he's still a Black man in America and seen as scary to some white people and police officers. I wish I didn't have to have these conversations with my beautiful and brilliant sons. I wish I didn't have to strip their innocence away from them by telling them about this cruel reality. But the stakes are high and it may save their lives. But the cruelest part of this reality is that these talks are no guarantee that their lives won't be taken. To walk this walk, you have to have that talk. I remember the laundry list of instructions I would give them when they went out of the house. Don't put the hood up on your hoodie. Don't put your hands in your pockets. If you get stopped, don't run. Put your hands up. Don't make a lot of moves. Don't be too loud. Keep your receipt and don't lose your cool when you're followed in the store or asked to show it. If you're on the elevator with someone, smile so that they know you're friendly and make sure that they can see where your hands are. Don't draw attention to yourself, which is impossible. It's hard to miss my son when he's the sole boy in a group of his white friends. I have to make sure that he understands that he can't do what they do, that he more often will be singled out and treated more severely for any bad behavior. It's even more impossible to not draw attention to himself when he's in a group of his Black friends. A gathering of 2 or more Black boys can look like a gang of thugs to some folks. Just them being together is enough to make some people uncomfortable and fearful. And the driving while Black instruction, well, that's a whole chapter on its own. To walk this walk, you have to have that talk. These are moments when being a mom is really hard, when my hope for humanity and my son's happiness is weighed down so far under this perpetual worry that it's like walking underwater. As a mother of young Black men, some of my greatest fears have unfolded in front of my eyes, and I've battled anxieties that I can't even start to put into words. I remember hearing George Floyd calling out for his mother in his dying breath. And I watched Ahmaud Arbery's mother break down in court when the video of her son being murdered played. When a Black man dies, a little bit of some Black woman who nurtured him or mothered him or loved him dies too. These shoes hurt, but to walk this walk, you better have those talks.
Thank you, Rochelle, for that. I appreciate you being here and giving that speech of such importance. Our next speaker is Ryan Oddman, followed by Randy Powell. Ryan Oddman, Grandma Gloria. Grandma Gloria, Ryan Oddman.
As I look at that photo of Grandma Gloria, I'm always reminded of the love, the joy, the peace, the gentleness, and everything so nice about Grandma Gloria. Let me tell you about Grandma Gloria. Grandma Gloria, she had this amazing apartment in Margate, Florida. Now, for those of you that know about Florida, Margate is in between Coral Springs and Fort Lauderdale, so north from Miami. And every summer that you would get to go visit Grandma Gloria, you would see this bright smile at the door of her apartment, just waiting, wanting to greet you, wanting to lift you up, wanting to just bring this exuberant energy towards you. With such bright spirit, she just makes you come alive when you give her this big, gigantic hug. And the thing is, when you go to Grandma Gloria's house, you know one thing's for sure. You are going to be served A1 service. It's better than a 5-star hotel. No kidding. So I remember when I would always go to Grandma Gloria's house and I would have that big hug. She would welcome us in and she would always ask this question, "Are you hungry? Can I get you anything? Do you want a drink? Do you want anything?" And we were always saying no, but she was always continually, persistently asking us, do you want anything? I have Irish potato. I have chicken. I have all these different things. I have Jell-O. I have Chips Ahoy. What would you like? Anything? Come on. And she would just persistently ask us. And then when we just got annoyed after a while, we were like, all right, I'll take some Jell-O with in Jamaica, we do this. In Jamaica, we pour evaporated milk on our Jell-O. So we'll have a Jell-O with evaporated milk. And Grandma would serve us so nicely. And I just remember how amazing it was going inside that apartment and just sitting down, watching Wheel of Fortune, hanging out with other family members, and just being in Grandma Gloria's presence. Made the beautiful, greatest memories to your mind. January 2010 came, and my grandma suffered a stroke. And we went to go visit her at the hospital, and seeing this amazing lady who exuberated such joy and such brightness to a lady in a hospital bed, it just showed me how precious life can be, and how she looked at me with such embarrassment, but she was just so thankful that we were there to support her. Thankfully, she had more months to live, a good year and a half to live. And I would see those bright moments where she would call me on the phone and she sounded so amazing again, lifted high. And then May 2011 comes, May 3rd, 2011 comes. And I was at school, and I couldn't stop thinking about my grandma. Like, something in my heart was just telling me, Ryan, give your grandma a call. Give your grandma a call. And I couldn't shake this feeling off my heart. For some reason, I just felt in my heart that my heart was telling me, you need to give her a call right now. So I gave her a call. And I said, hey, Grandma. And her voice was fading. And my mom always encouraged us to always tell everyone that I love you. So I told my grandma in that moment, hey, Grandma, I just wanted to say I love you. And she said in her own Jamaican accent, I love you too, Ryan. I love you too. I gotta go. The next day, my cousins come to school to tell me the news about my grandma's passing. 11 years later, those memories definitely put things in perspective for you. But the thing is, what always brings such light to my day every day I think about this story is at age of 2, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and I wasn't supposed to talk, read, or do anything. I was supposed to be in an institution by 20. And my grandma would just pray that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ would give me the ability to speak. And boy, does God have a sense of humor. At the age of 5, I started to speak. And 11 years later, I don't think Grandma realized how impactful those prayers were. Because here I am speaking at Speakers Bureau. And next month, I'm going to be be a keynote speaker at a foster care high school graduation. And then July, I'm going to be speaking at University of Southern California. So it just brings things into perspective that, Grandma, I love you, and I'm so thankful for you. And I'm so thankful that I'm here at Toastmasters pursuing the dream that you prayed for me. So with all that being said, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, continue to honor your mothers, whether they were good or not. Honor them by living the best life you can right here and right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I knew you would live up to the moment and help bring my successful meeting. You bring some tears to some eyes I see out there already. Thank you, Randy. Our next speaker is Randy, followed by John Collins. Randy Powell, she's still here. She's still here. Randy Powell.
When you think of your mom, what thoughts and feelings run through your head? Is it joy, happiness, sadness, despair? Perhaps I just tapped into a little something that perhaps you haven't even dealt with yet. I'm sensitive to that, but don't you worry. There's nothing but love here tonight. My mom, Mrs. Alva Eloise Brown, I call it her born on date, but in her records it said sunrise, July 11th, 1925. Sunset, April 20th, 2015. Now, I might sound like I'm excited talking about my mom, and I am. I'm proud of her, and she's still here to this day. You see, I carry her with me every place I go, right here. People often ask me, where do you get all that energy? And I never thought about it until Tom said, we're having Speakers Bureau and a tribute to our moms. And as I reflected back, that question popped up and I realized my mom traveled all the time. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there were only great times in our lives, but I will tell you she overcame. She overcame an awful lot. Oftentimes I'm asked, well, how is it you never quit, Randy? My mom never quit. She never, ever quit. Well, what drives you? My mom. Now, I wouldn't have answered those questions that way, and I've been asked those questions many times as a speaker, as a coach, just as a playmate, as a husband. My wife asks me all the time, didn't you get any sleep last night? How can you go all day? You see, my mom raised 3 sons in the 60s. I was born in 1954. My oldest brother passed away when I was 21. I was 14 years old. And the reason my mom, Mrs. Brown, as the neighborhood kids would call her, the reason her last name obviously is Brown because she divorced my father and she never talked about him. She never badmouthed him, but she never talked about him. But I have pictures of him and I know his last name, it was Powell, and his first name was Leroy. And I remember asking an aunt of mine, well, what about my dad? And she lit up and she said he was a great man. So whatever reason there was for their divorce, their breakup, my mom never had a bad word to say about him or anyone. In fact, if she was suspicious of you, she would just say, there's something not, I just can't put my finger on it, but there's something not right with that person. But she never had a bad word. She taught us many of life's toughest lessons. You see, when I was 14 and my 21-year-old brother passed away, he was everything. He was like my big brother, but he was also like my dad. He was my best friend. And I took care of my younger brother and I became the protector of him at a very young age. At a time when most women found it difficult just to make it with husbands in the 50s and 60s, let alone to be an African-American woman growing up in the 60s with 3 boys and having to provide for them. She held 2 jobs all the time. I never knew my mom not to have 2 jobs. She purchased her own home and she ensured that we were educated. My grandmother was a staunch educator. In fact, she had a lifelong teaching credential and degree for the state of Mississippi at a time when it was remarkable and unusual, in fact, unprecedented. You see, my grandmother was very fair-skinned too, because of our Indian background, our Creole background, our Puerto Rican background, mixed with the wonderful continent of Africa. And she taught my mom to never quit. Now, I didn't understand some of the things that were going on when I was young, but I remember my mom always looked out for young men. And I remember this young man, his name was Gaylord. He happened to be a cousin of mine, but I didn't know it at the time. And my mom took him in off the streets, and he became a professional boxer. And my mom was respected in the neighborhood by all the young men, and nobody would ever mess with Miss Brown. But I will tell you that there were some things that I carry in my heart today because she's never left me. And I'm going to share those lessons with you very quickly. And I want you to get these lessons because maybe your parents didn't teach you these lessons. She said, you come this way once. Don't waste the time you're given. Make it count. She said, you can make a difference. Character can never be stolen from you, and others will testify to that fact. She said, protect those who cannot protect themselves, especially the elderly and children, and respect your elders, Randy. She said, work hard, but play hard when you can. Pray often, like Granny taught you. Treat people well no matter how they treat you, because it will count in the end, no matter how much pain and suffering there is. She said, don't shy away from showering your love no matter what. She said, do your best, son, always, not sometimes, always. And she said, finally, look out for other young men. And she was specifically talking about young African-American men because of the hard times we were going through in the 60s and 70s. And she said, guide them when you can. See that they have an opportunity and a chance to do better. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Wow, Randy, we're getting lessons and wonderful things for us to take with us. When you mentioned those things, and I really one thing, I forgot to do this after Rochelle spoke, but she had a line in a speech earlier on that I will carry with me for a long time, and she belongs to the same club I do on Saturday. And that line, I want all of you to remember that she said the most important thing to teach your children is to be kind. And what a lesson for us all to take with us. Our next speaker, and I want to check, is John Collins there? Are you there? I know he stepped out for a bit.
I am, Tom.
Okay, our next speaker is John Collins, followed by Jesus Guerrero. John Collins, Betsy's Rainbow.
A rainbow is a special kind of arc. Implied in an arc is motion, because in your imagination, you can travel from one end of the arc to the other. Good evening, my fellow Toastmasters and anyone else who may have wandered in off the street. This is my first time. Let's talk about arcs and rainbows and my mother. Some NBA stars shoot lots of three-pointers, long distance arcs that some people call rainbows. In theater, we like to talk about the arc of the story or the arc of a character, because where you start, at least in most good plays or films, is not where you end up. Sometimes we get a happy ending. Life, well, life ends in death. Not very happy, really. But for a life well lived, we celebrate the happiness that a person brings to others. Such is the arc of my mother's life. Her name was Elizabeth. That name has many nicknames. My mother's choice, Betsy, not Beth or Liz or anything else, Betsy. As a girl, Betsy Becker. After marrying my father, Betsy Collins. After marrying her high school boyfriend, Betsy Epperson. Betsy was an artist, a teacher, and my mom. It's been 17 years since I, her only child, organized her memorial. She would have turned 94 this year. We celebrated her story, the arc of her life, but it wasn't like nature's perfect arc, the rainbow. Her life was more like a slowly moving roller coaster. She worked hard to become the best violinist at Long Beach Poly High School, and then went to college and earned a music degree. Then she got married to another musician, my dad, and she became a mom. Yes, if you're following along, an only child of two musicians. My friends know that explains a lot. Betsy's roller coaster included dealing with an alcoholic husband who traveled the world as an elite jazz trumpet player. Brilliant guy, devilishly handsome, and uber talented. Let's say that at home or abroad, Dad was never lonely. They split when I was in junior high, but it took years for me to understand what Mom had to deal with. Dad's talent didn't produce a great deal of income either. So Mom got her teaching credential and became an outstanding elementary school teacher. I knew many kids who had her, and many said she was the best teacher ever. When the school district, in its infinite wisdom, rotated her from her cushy school in North Long Beach to the inner city, she literally had a nervous breakdown and left teaching. She loved those kids, but she simply was not prepared to deal with such a different working environment. But by then she'd married Jim Epperson, her body surfing pal in high school, who became a World War II Marine combat veteran and fantastic English teacher at Long Beach City College. Jim was a much better partner in life than my dad. Those two men were polar opposites. Jim was a patient observer of my relationship with my mom. Even in high school, I had a low threshold of tolerance for some of Mom's mothering. Many times I would exclaim, "Oh, Mother," accompanied by a world-class eye roll. I went off to college and I'd get an occasional note from Jim about goings-on in Long Beach. His only name for Betsy in these notes was "Oh, Mother," spelled O-M-O-T-H-E-R, exclamation point. He'd say in his note, "Oh, Mother went to the symphony tonight," or "Oh, Mother had lunch with Maria today." That was his way to remind me that sometimes I played the drama card a little too often, but he did it with great humor. Overall, I was raised in a culturally rich environment. Mom introduced me to many art forms: music, dance, theater, painting, sculpture from around the world. And she never stopped teaching in the broad sense. For example, she became a docent at two well-regarded institutions, the California State Art Museum in Long Beach, and at a historical site also in Long Beach, dating from the days of early California. Betsy's kindnesses extended to friends and family and students endlessly. Her imperfect arc may have been a roller coaster, but the colorful experiences she shared with her students and with me were dazzling. As an artist and a patron of the arts, Mom wore a lot of black in her later years. Betsy's life, however, a multicolored rainbow, will live in our hearts as long as her friends and I remember her. Oh, Mother, you left too soon. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated. I did hear your speech before, and I knew it had to be a part of this program. Our next speaker is Jesus Guerrero, followed by Melinda Maganzo. If she's been able to get off of her assignment, she was teaching tonight and had to move her speaking opportunity till later in the evening. So we'll hope she gets here. Anyway, if she does not, it would be Connie Jameson. Our next speaker, Jesus Guerrero, the Family's Foundation. The Family's Foundation, Jesus Guerrero.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow members, the word foundation has many meanings. It can mean starting something new, like a new group or club, even a belief system or a philosophy, even a substructure beneath a building. For me, my parents created my foundation. My father, Jesus Guerrero, was 26 years old when he married my mom, Bertha Guerrero, in Mexico, and they immediately immigrated to this country, the United States of America. They came here with barely even the clothing on their backs, but they had a wealth of dreams. They had a dream for a better life, not just for themselves, but for the children that they hoped to have. And they had 4 sons. They had Hugo, Jaime, Jesus, and Enrique. And it was a great time growing up in this family. Now, my father, he was the provider. He was the worker. He was amazing. He's my hero. My mom, she's the glue that melded our family, just glued it together, took a group of individuals and made us one. My mom's amazing, so multi-talented. She could sing like an angel. She could make our clothing. She made floral arrangements. And in the kitchen, she was a master. Phenomenal. Every morning I'd wake up with the sounds of clack, 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 clack. That's the sound of a wooden rolling pin hitting a marble slab as she made homemade, fresh flour tortillas. The smells of those tortillas on that cast iron grill would permeate to every corner of the house, and they would even penetrate our deepest slumber. My brothers and I, we would wake up and stumble into the kitchen, grabbing a fresh tortilla, slathering it with a nice stick of butter. That bite was sublime. I can still taste it. In fact, no matter what she made, enchiladas, taquitos, anything, were fantastic. In fact, you could say that she laid the foundation for the man that I am today. But she had a great sense of humor too, and still does. She was mischievous and playful and childlike. One time I came home from school and I made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, nice white bread, a nice slathering of creamy peanut butter, and maybe an excessive amount of strawberry preserves. Set it on the plate, went to get a nice cold glass of milk. I turned around, my sandwich was gone. I looked up and saw my mother running from the kitchen, and I gave chase. I caught her in the living room the next room over, as she was stuffing my sandwich in its entirety into her mouth. I could see the jelly and the peanut butter just oozing from her fingers. And I heard the muffled sounds of laughter as it tried to escape past the impacted sandwich. Her eyes were just glinting with merriment and mischievousness. To this day, I can't see a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without thinking of my mom. You know, she stressed education. She wanted me to have brains over brawn. Once when we were little, my brothers and I, we were all sitting at the dinner table, and she asked my oldest brother, Hugo, what would you like to be when you grow up? And my brother said, I'm going to be a doctor. And she was, yes, we have a doctor in the family. We're going to have a doctor in the family. Jaime, what about you? And he was, I'm going to be a doctor too. He goes, yay, we have two doctors in the family. I knew I was next. I was ready. I was ready. I knew what I was going to be. She goes, what about you, Jesus? What are you going to be? And I said, I'm going to work with my dad. And I was waiting for the roars, the cheers, the adulation. And I was surprised when both my parents said, no, that's not what we want for you. I didn't understand that their dreams for me were greater than any dreams I had for myself. Years later, I was in college, and it was like a carnival, a house of glass. I would bump into everything, barriers every single direction. I said, I've got to get out of this crazy place. I'm quitting school. I'm going to get a job. And so I informed my mom that I was quitting college. And she just nodded her head, turned around, walked away, only to reappear in a few moments and handed me a card. That was a card I had written when I was 10 years old to my father on Father's Day. And in that card, I promised. I said, Dad, I'm so proud to be your son, and I'm so proud to carry your name. And I promise I will never quit. I will never quit college or school until I do something great with your name. Obviously, how could I fight that? I stayed in school. Several years later, I graduated from the University of Southern California with a Doctor of Pharmacy degree. My mom, well, she's well in her 80s now. And she's stooped with age. There's pain, her knees, her back, her hands. She can't use that rolling pin anymore. I wish I could hear it one more time. But she achieved what she set out to achieve. She came to this country and founded a new family in a new place. She taught me that having a belief in God and hard work can make miracles come true. She gave me a base of support where I could chase my own dreams. She built a strong foundation, an enduring foundation. My mom, she gave me my foundation. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jesus. And just for your audience's understanding, Jesus is one of 3 people speaking tonight who have an offspring in the audience. Think of that message being shared with young people who sometimes don't listen beyond the first 30 seconds out of your mouth. So, okay, is Melinda here? I knew she was going to have a bit of a problem getting here, so we can go to our next speaker and come back to Melinda if she can make it from her teaching role this evening. Our next speaker is Connie Jameson, followed by David Flores. Before I forget, if we have time at the end, there may be someone in the audience who was not assigned to speak, who might have a few words, even on impromptu basis, to share about their mother this evening, as long as we have the time. All right, with that, we go to Connie Jameson.
Three mothers. Whoa, Connie, you must have been quite a handful. No, I'm certain I was quite a good little girl. It didn't take 3 mothers to keep me in line. However, there were 3 women who served as wonderful mother figures during my young childhood. Mother number 1, Maxine Stevens, my birth mother, the mother who gave me life. Maxine was only 16 years old when I was born. She was either married in name only or married for a brief period of time to my birth father. It must have been difficult being a divorced mother of a newborn baby at age 16 with only a 10th grade education. Mother number 2, Lulabelle Knutson, my aunt, one of my mother's older sisters. Lulabelle was a farmer's wife. She and Uncle Al never had children of their own, but I learned that I had lived with them during part of my early years. Mother number 3, Donna Williams, my grandmother, mother of my mom, my Aunt Lulabelle, and at least 5 more aunts and uncles. As I grew up, Grandma Williams was always there with her loving and caring ways. How I relished that frequent question. You know how much I love you, Connie Mae? This much. And that short, plump lady would spread her arms wide to give me a long, wiggly, jiggly hug. The mystery for me of the 3 mothers is the time factor. Which of the 3 were there and when were they there? serving as my mom during the parts of my formative years, from birth till I was age 4 or 5 years. My mom, Maxine, gave birth to my sister Judy when I was 4 years old. She went on to have 5 additional children. I was adopted by my stepfather, Fred, who was always a great dad to me. So I always just said I was the oldest of 7 children. But did I go to live with my mom and dad as soon as they married? As soon as my sister was born? Or did they wait a little while to settle in before they had me join the family? Because I did not attend kindergarten, it leads me to believe that I might have still been living way out in the country with my aunt and uncle during that year. As a young mother, where did my mother live during that time before she married my stepdad? On her own? At home with her parents? With my aunt and uncle? Was I there with her? I know children are not able to remember much, if anything, during their first years of life. My mom was a good, hardworking mom. She took good care of all our daily needs. We did not, however, have a very warm, comfortable relationship. No long, cozy, long chats. It would have been hard to ask questions and discuss certain matters with her. So I never really asked those questions about the first years of my life. I wish I had. I've wondered if my Aunt Lulabelle, being childless, wished that she could have kept me as her own child. Was my grandma part of the decision-making about where I should live and who should take the mothering roles for me? I'll never know those answers because no one is still alive who could provide the information. I know in the big picture, it really doesn't matter. I had a good childhood. It's just those questions, a bit of a mystery. I see my early years as a jigsaw puzzle spread out there on the tabletop. Some pieces of the puzzle fitted together, other pieces just spread apart. I do recall the old white farmhouse with a big lawn out in front and playing with that pet collie. Ah, a puzzle piece for the time spent with my Aunt Lulabelle. But I also recall sitting in an upstairs apartment of a house, looking out the window at the downstairs neighbor's dog roaming around in the yard. A puzzle piece for time with my mom. I've always been the outdoorsy, nature-loving one of my siblings. Ah, a puzzle piece for the farm influence. Or not. Who knows? What I do know is I consider all 3 women to have been mother figures, providing me with a safe, caring, loving childhood. My husband Tom and I have been foster parents for several children. Plus, we adopted our daughter Tina as a newborn. I was also a teacher for many years. I hope that I have been a good mother figure to youngsters over the years. Happy Mother's Day to all. May you receive and give many greetings and expressions of appreciation for mothers in your lives. For me, happy Mother's Day to Mom, Aunt Lulabelle, and Grandma Williams. I love you, my 3 mothers. Tom.
Thank you, Connie, for that. Wonderful story. Our next speaker is David Flores, followed by me. David Flores, My Mother's DNA.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. welcome guest. My mother's DNA. We know that when we're born, we take half our chromosomes from our father, another half from our mother. And certain people say that there are certain traits that each child will inherit from your parents. My mom, I'm so grateful that she gave me a trait that I have cherished for most of my life. And that trait is she has always been a person who always positive in life, enjoyed life as much as she could, and made friends whenever she had the opportunity to do so. She lived a fun life doing things that she liked to do. But I learned later in life, as I got older, that my mom had to go through some difficult times, some difficult challenges. And I could always wonder, why would she be so positive of all the things that had gone wrong in her life and the losses she had to live with? Some of the biggest challenges we face in life is losing loved ones or people that are close to you. I found out about my mom's early life and the challenges she faced. Picture in your mind a little girl, probably in the age of 5, 6, maybe 7 years old, taking a wooden crate, placing it underneath the window of mom and dad's bedroom, and peering inside. What she saw, I'll come back to in a second. But what I realized when I found out the story of her life in her early years is that she would have been one of 7 siblings altogether. But unfortunately, the first birth of her mother's, the child passed away. Then my mom was born. Then again, a child passed away in another pregnancy. Then after that, her younger brother was born. Again, a child came into the earth and passed away. Then following that, her second younger brother was born. Now back to the window, as she peered in, at the moment, her father was taking the bed sheet and covering up her mother, who had just passed away in childbirth. A few hours later, the baby died also. I'm sure she realized the losses because she was old enough to know that watching her mother go through pregnancy and then knowing that there would be a younger brother or a younger sister coming, but never came, and it lost it. So she had losses in her life from a very early age, and yet it didn't affect her in her own life. She managed to bounce back and really live life to the fullest. The losses I know of her in her life, but I was around, was obviously when my father passed away after a long marriage with my mom. She mourned like she always does, and then she bounced back and go on with life. Her father passed away, and the same thing. That was the only grandparent I knew, but I was too young to realize much about it, and I don't know how much she mourned, but she always seemed to be in an upside mood. She was always happy. She was always doing things for us and doing things for her friends and neighbors. Then later in life, her brother passed away, her younger brother. I remember that. She mourned for her younger brother, but again, picked herself up, got on with life, and enjoyed it as much as she could. But a couple of occasions I thought were really going to be difficult for her. I remember that she agonized for a whole year when her second oldest son, my half brother, Bobby, was in Vietnam. And she would pray every night for his safety to come home. And after his year's term and after his service in the military, he survived and came home. I know she was very happy. She was really thrilled to have him back safe and sound. But unfortunately, a few years later, he became ill, quite ill. And within a week's time, passed away. They said it was probably from Agent Orange exposure, but they would never admit any guilt on that report. So as a mother and as a parent, those kind of losses are probably the most difficult to have. Yet she moved on with life, continued to be as brilliant and happy as she could be. Then years later, again, a loss, her daughter to cancer. As a parent, that's probably the most difficult thing and the most biggest challenge and losses you can have in life is that of your sibling, your children going before you. But she lived life and she went on. I know that she was sad for quite a while when her two children passed away. But again, she still picked up and moved right along. In fact, she kept her humor all through her life, even in her older ages, prior to passing away at the ripe age of 93. That I would take her to the doctor's office, and she would joke with people all the time and meet with them. And the doctor would ask her, "How you doing?" And she would say something like, "Now, tell me more about these golden years I'm waiting to have." She just always had a smile. She was always outgoing. She never let life get her down. And that's a trait I think I picked up from her, because I have had challenges in life, nothing like hers. But every time I had a challenge, I would pick myself up, dust myself off, and move on. And that's a trait I think I picked up from my mom. So I'm really honored and happy that of all things that she left with me, she left me the ability to continue on with life, to enjoy it as much as I can, not to take it too seriously, but to make the best of the time you have. And I think that's what I really honor most about her, is that she was always, always happy all the way to the end. And I am so proud to have had her pass that trait on to me, because I know my brother didn't get it because he's the opposite of me. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you so much for that, David. Keep us all, pick up our spirits to be able to take some of your mom's DNA with us tonight. So thank you for doing that. Well, I want to thank somebody else. I want to thank Melinda Maganzo for being able to get here just in time to save me from having to speak next. Melinda Maganzo, followed by me. You walk with divine favor. You walk with divine favor. Melinda Maganzo.
All right, good night, District 12. How are we doing? Woo-woo! You walk with divine favor. I just did 2 live lectures teaching my students, but here's the story. You walk with divine favor. You get up every day, you're on a mission, you're here to accomplish life, and you tell yourself that you're on a mission. And when you think about the mission, you say, how am I going to get it done? Yes, my mother gave birth to me. My mother gave birth to twins. I am a twin. I have a twin brother, but I'm 2 minutes older than him, and I never let him forget it at the age of 62. It's not what you got, it's what you do with what you got. He likes to tell people he pushed me out of the condo. Yes, he says that, about how he came through life and how I'm here first. When I think about the story about us as twins, I think about our journey of life and how mom instilled principles in us. One of the principles that mom instilled in us was the value of education. Education gives you access into doors that you would not ordinarily have access to. Hello, somebody. Yes, you get some knowledge. It's just not that knowledge is power. It's shared knowledge that's power. So in the course of life, as you navigate life, to think about that power. Where do I get the power from? Well, it comes from your mother. Yes, who gave birth to you. Hallelujah. I'm 6'12", he was 6'14", and we're navigating through life. Mommy used to, every year when we went to school, we went through these IQ tests to see which twin was smarter. My mom got so irritated with those tests that when we got to the 5th grade, what she did was she stopped it. And she told that 5th grade teacher, enough is enough. Melinda's going on to the 6th grade. Miguel is staying here back in the 5th grade. I got you. Think about it. Yes. And so mama stopped that madness in the world of work. Think about how you navigate life. I have the paradigm there. The title is You Walk with Divine Favor. As I think about my life and how mom instilled the power of education, we all soar through educational opportunities. My older sister has her doctorate. She was a nurse and went into, I forgot what her specialty is and her PhD she has. My younger sister's a nurse, just like mom, but now she's doing her PhD in naturopath. My twin brother, he pursued education as far as the EMT in the medical profession and medical technology. He's finishing up his doctorate in liver transplantation. And I'm currently at Cal Baptist doing my PhD in leadership studies. Mom put that stamp of education into our brain cells that it's not what you got, it's what you do with what you got, and that's what makes the difference. I think about myself now as a mother, and I have 2 daughters. They're 33 and 29 now, And I always told them as I navigated my path through life, you walk with divine favor. When I had to make a tough decision about what was happening in my life, the tough decision that I made was it was time to shut down the bondage in my life. And sometimes you have to make that tough decision. So when I decided to walk away, I always taught my daughters that you walk with divine favor. Because of my busy life navigating my career and providing for my daughters, they used to take the city bus to school. And we used to pray every morning, and they were that latchkey kids. Yes, they were latchkey kids. And they learned how to navigate and understand the power of how God was going to protect them in every aspect of their life. And that's what it's about. When you think about divine favor, F is that favor, that foresight that you see, God gives you that. When you think about favor, A is your attitude, which you set up in society and how you navigate your compass. A, B, that you're going to be victorious in every situation because I got the power. You remember Bruce Almighty from years ago? Woo! And everything happens. Yes, favor says that. O is that you have a one-time shot. That one-time shot is you have an opportunity to make things outrageous for people. Yes, I love being outrageous with people. Look at me like I'm nuts and I'm crazy. But yes, like Kevin Hart says, you're going to learn today. You walk with divine favor. And then the R says you have the power to ensue and infuse rejuvenation to your people. So think about the favor that you have the opportunity as a Toastmaster to share with people as you navigate your compass. Yes, think about it. F, where's your foresight? Yes, do you have that eye candy? Yes, where's your favor, your attitude? Is it awesome? You get to recognize and stimulate. V, you are victorious because you recognize what you bring to the stage. O, are you outrageous? Are you willing to be outside of the box? And R, can you rejuvenate your audience? You walk with divine favor in all situations. How fun. Yesterday, I was at Redlands Community Hospital to share for the Nurse Appreciation Week. Yes, how to cultivate a community of happiness and positivity. Fellow Toastmasters, distinguished Toastmasters, qualified speakers, District 12, recognize that you walk with divine favor in every situation of your life. Recognize your favor. Don't get it twisted. Be outrageous. Go for the goal. Be outside the box. Get out of your comfort zone and soar to the next level. I dare you, District 12. We walk with divine favor. Claim it. Say you put your hands up and say, I have the power. Come on, everybody. Say, I have the power. Let me see your hands up. Come on, wake up. I have the power. Let me see your hands up. I have the power. There it is. Back to you, Tom. Thank you for this opportunity. Melinda signing off.
Thank you. Thank you, Melinda, for making time out of your workday, squeezing away from your teaching class that you're teaching. Certainly appreciate your making that extra effort. I will be the next speaker, and we had a volunteer from Frankie Jones. You know, it's strange. I scheduled myself last because I thought of the Herculean task of trying to get 15 5 to 7 minute speeches in 2 hours, hoping that maybe I could be the one that would back out at the end and I'd have a perfect excuse for not speaking. But I didn't get off that easily. Everyone was very efficient and got through their speeches, and we will be here and they will have me, and then we will call on Frankie Jones. My speech, ahead of her time. My mother definitely was ahead of her time. No, I don't mean free love, tattoos, miniskirts, online dating, pierced body parts, and foul language, but she was definitely ahead of her time. My mother was born in 1910 to a family of 7 children on a farm in the middle of Iowa. Her mother was a teacher, and she became a teacher. I guess that makes me a 3rd generation teacher. She became a school teacher and would drive a horse and buggy to school. How do you become a teacher, believe it or not, at the age of 18? Well, she had really good grades in high school. She passed the interview, passed the test to get her license. And in Iowa, that was all it took to be a school teacher in a one-room school that taught all 8 grades. Her father was a very successful farmer who was regularly sought out for farming advice. His goal was to provide a farm to each of his 7 children. He did not even like the idea of driving his Model T, so my mother usually drove him into town for supplies because he didn't like getting behind the wheel of that vehicle. He trusted her to do so even at the age of 13 with no driver's license. I've heard that Model Ts are not very easy to drive. Without even, after teaching, she went to college at Waverly, Iowa, and she was ahead of her time because she got this idea that she would like to become a lawyer after working in a lawyer's office for a while. And the more she thought about that, and the more she planned for it, she decided that was not probably the best thing to do since women were hardly considered okay to be lawyers, and maybe she should think of some other profession. It was the Depression. Her father, who had already given 2 farms to his oldest children, began to lose his farms, and in the end, he lost them all and was not able to provide for her with her education. He found out there was an opportunity in the big city of Chicago from that little farm town, and it was an opportunity to become a registered nurse. Her goal was to become a registered nurse, had to do with the fact that she wanted to be a world traveler, and you could do that as an airline stewardess. You could travel the world, but you had to be a registered nurse. That was the requirement of being an airline stewardess, believe it or not, in the middle 30s during the Depression. She found a program in Chicago that would provide room, board, training, education as long as she was there, and worked at the hospital. She learned what she was doing, and without any student loans to pay off at the end, but with very severe living accommodations, including a time that she had to be in and a time before she could go out. When she got her diploma, she finally became a nurse, but things had changed. She had married, I had been born, and you could not be a stewardess if you were married. So then her career was to be a registered nurse for the rest of her life. Many times, as a private duty nurse, she was working 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and would go on sometimes even a month or more. And she was just always at work every day. Other times she had regular hours. But she provided me with a substitute mom, and that was my grandmother, a very sweet, as I say, a farm wife. And she would be there when I came home from school. And I remember all those wonderful, sweet, warm memories that she was a good person. But I most of all remember the homemade donuts and chocolate cakes she would make and teach me to make. And those were the things. And then there were other things she made for me. I remember much of the time I was wearing shirts in grade school that she had made from cloth and sewn. I didn't realize how special that was at the time when all the other kids are wearing store-bought clothing and I had to wear homemade, but I was wearing something that was made at home, and the warm thoughts that I had of her. My mother brought warm thoughts to me too, because I remember every Sunday we would have popcorn and sit around with the family and share a bowl of popcorn. It probably added to my addiction to the concept of popcorn. And now I think that's the only food that I would never want to give up, no matter what. She had different feelings about animals too. Animals are meant to be outside. As she grew up on a farm, that's where they belong. But somehow we twisted her arm into having a dog that stayed in the house and stayed with us. And Bouncer was so special. They taught me responsibility. There were lots of chores to do, but they also gave me opportunities to go out and explore. At the 7th and 8th grade, I was out with a shotgun and a rifle hunting for rabbits. And soon I was able to find a job at 12. They let me go do that. Many parents did not. I spent a lot of those later years working because they were allowing me to have the freedom and responsibility. But I also knew that that meant don't get in trouble while you're a teenager, or they may not be bailing you out. So I never gave them any reason to fear. They even let me have the responsibility of riding a train all the way to Iowa, 250 miles by myself at the age of 8 to stay with family relatives for a week. I remember having a BB gun that was so much fun and just shooting things. Oh my gosh, at 7 or 8. And then I shot at a group of little ducks and I killed a baby duck. I went and grabbed it and in tears, I brought it to my mother. and asked, well, can you fix it? I mean, she's a nurse, right? She should be able to bring it back to life. And she said she could not save it. But that was a lesson that I should learn not to do the things I knew I shouldn't be doing. I will remember that lesson for the rest of my life. In addition to that lesson, we brought home 2 of those other ducks that survived my shooting escapade and raised them. And it was so much fun having those little ducks follow me around the yard. It took away a little bit of the fun in the fall when my father butchered one, and that was our Thanksgiving dinner. And he expected us to eat it. I did not like that idea too much at all. My mother was so welcoming of friends that I girls and boys, other friends that I brought home for dinner, and did not look at them with disapproving looks. So then maybe sometimes she did disapprove of who I brought home. She even listened to my music. I can't imagine it was the most pleasant thing for her, but she tried to listen and be concerned and try to be interested in my interests. I do remember all those Saturday mornings she spent most of her Saturday doing laundry. What a chore, working all week, and then having to spend that time with the wash machine, the wringer, and hanging it out. Anybody remember hanging out clothes? That sure made for a real project, but she wanted her family to have clean clothes. The culmination of my story with my mother is to remember this. At the age of 19, I was working full-time, 66 hours a week, and she was about ready to buy a new Chevy Biscayne. For those of you who don't know, that was the bottom of the barrel of new Chevys, for about $2,100. And I was able to somehow convince her that why don't we buy a new Corvette for $3,800 and split it half. You can drive it whenever you want. I will never interfere with when you want to drive it. I will only drive it in the time that's left over. And I never did change that commitment. But she had a lot of fun, but she did also, we saved money on insurance and so on. But one of her favorite stories was that when driving to work one day in her nurse's uniform at the age of 50 something, and a policeman pulled her over and accused her of drag racing somebody. And she said she was just so upset. She said, drag racing, what do you think's going on here? But then we got to the real question, because once the policeman had seen who she was, he says, what is a woman like you doing driving a car like this? And that really set her off, and she enjoyed telling that story numerous times over the years. And what business do you have of telling me what kind of car I can be driving? Boy, that's a long ways away from driving that Model T in 1923. If you're out there listening, Mom, thanks so much. I love you so much. And it's been a very special living with you as a child and growing up with you. And next we go to Frankie Jones. And I don't have a title for Frankie, but you'll have to tell us. Frankie?
I put it in the chat. Hannah Waverly.
I was a little busy.
Yes, you were busy. Hannah Waverly, my mom. Hannah Waverly Lance was born in Idaho at Coeur d'Alene on August 6, 1911. She was raised in Sandpoint. And my grandma, who lived to be 104, by the way, joined the Jehovah's Witness movement early on, which my mom soundly rejected. So they didn't have a real close relationship. Mom was in nurse's training when she met my dad. He was studying pre-med. And they ended up getting married, and it was wartime. I was born on October 7th, 1944 in Roswell, New Mexico. And no comments, please. Mom was serving as a nurse in the Japanese internment camp there, which she said was very sad for her. Dad was in the Army Air Corps. He had joined. And they divorced when I was 6 years old. I have no idea why. Neither one of them would talk about it. But Dad was a philanderer, I believe. And he was cocky and arrogant and ebullient and a great guy in many ways and a handful in others. But Mom continued nursing in Fresno with my dad's great aunt, or actually my dad's aunt, who came over from Holland. And my dad's mom died very early when he was 8, but Aunt, gosh, can't remember her name, and Uncle Ralph lived in the Fresno area, and we're Mom's basic family. I went to live with my dad, and we traveled in the Air Force and went all over, went to Europe. But I rejoined my mom in high school, and that's when we really got to know each other. Mom was a gentle soul, except if you talked politics and you had anything bad to say about Pat Brown. She was pretty staunch on that. She became a competitive dancer with Arthur Murray, and she did that for many, many years. She retired from nursing when she was 77 years old. So she was always a hard worker. She gave a lot to the charity at the hospital that she served in Fresno. And her dancing was wonderful. She won many medals, and she, graduated into the different classes as she grew older, but she was always out there. I know she came up to have me be with her when she had a stent put in her heart, or the pacemaker rather. And I picked her up from the hospital, and we had to go to the dance club's party that night. And she's out there on the dance floor doing the jitterbug. And I believe she was in her early 70s at that time. So she has taught me to live life completely. She always maintained a calm demeanor, and I think that followed up on, followed me throughout my life. I don't get rattled very easily. I always take a deep breath when something startling happens so that I can center myself and figure out what's going on. She had an infectious laugh. She was so fun. She always was smiling and making friends. She would have her cocktails when she was at her party every once in a while. And she smoked maybe one cigarette a week. Not sure what that was about, but she had that cigarette that she had once a week. So I guess we all have our addictions. My dad happened to turn out to be an alcoholic, and that type A personality, you know how it is. And he eventually found AA and did better at the end of his life, but he sure beat himself up in the process. But Mom never had a bad word to say about him, except when, I think it was 10 years after they had been divorced. I'm not sure what happened, but I heard her say, well, I'm glad she has him. And that's my stepmom, who is another influential part. She had the patience of Job. She also was a nurse, interesting. And she always had time to teach me. We did knitting and crocheting when we were in England. When I had to do the dishes, if I didn't do them right, I got to do them again. When I had my own children, I thought, well, it's easier just to do it myself. But she would make sure everything was done on time. She had me iron my dad's uniforms. Those khaki uniforms, those blue shirts. If I didn't do them right, sprinkle bottle came out, we rolled them up, and we did them again. So I thank her for her patience, for teaching me basic homemaking skills. She wasn't a great cook. My dad was the cook in the family, and we got to clean up the mess. But both of my moms, I feel so blessed to have in my life. They definitely had a good influence on me in so many ways. And Mom taught me the love of dance and singing. And I will forever remember when she came to live with us in her final years. She was 86 years old. Just the time that we had to spend. I had to take a medical interview for her when she was older. And that's when I found out that she broke her arm when she climbed out the upstairs banner, over the banner, to meet my dad for a date. So she was a little rebellious on her own. And it was fun getting to know her in the later years, even though we didn't spend the formative years together. She was a great friend, and I'm glad I had the time I had with her. Mr. Toastmaster.
Well, thank you, Frankie. And especially thank you to all those speakers who came tonight to share with us. When I was district governor, my theme for my year of being district governor was welcome to our Toastmaster family. I think each of you have added yourselves to the Toastmaster family with this sharing of personal information. And it is so important that that's been done. This meeting shall be recorded, right, Rob? And we will have access to get to it in the future on YouTube. And hopefully next month in June will be just as good. I could not have imagined tonight being better, but we hope that we will have an outstanding meeting. And as I said, we still have room for a couple of people to, if you volunteer, let me know, and we will try to get you onto the program. And with that, one last thing, Roz or Suzanne, did you think of anything that you still need to announce before we say goodbye?
Nope, I'm sticking to it.
Sticking to it. Okay, well, we are pretty
weekend
darn
is-
close to being on time, which is more than I expected to happen. So thank
Yeah.
you all. And it's been a very special night. We had quite a number of people here, one of our more highly attended meetings. So thank you all for being here. You, the audience, are also extremely important to the success of Speakers Bureau. Thank you again, and we will see you next month or at the conference this Saturday.
Saturday. See you Saturday.
Okay. All right. Bye all.
Bye all. Bye.